how about LSU, right? No, we're done with the ACC, so let's move out to, SEC big picture. LSU went over to UCLA and got boat raced by a Pac-12 team that wasn't even ranked. This is another conference that people are talking about is in shambles, and I really don't understand why or where that's coming from. And I'm talking about the Pac-12. Now, the Pac-12 North is kind of in shambles. I'm not too worried about Oregon keeping it close against Fresno. Fresno was a decent team. Also, Fresno State had already played a game. I talked last week about how important that is. If you've already played a game and your opponent hasn't played a game, I think that's a huge advantage. I would never want to play a team in week one if that team had already played a game. I guarantee you Miami scores 3 more touchdowns against Alabama. They probably still lose, but if they had played some warm-up game in week 0 before Alabama, that would make a difference, right? If Minnesota would have played a game before that Ohio State game, they probably win that game. So I think that's huge. I think that's why UCLA came into the LSU game with so much experience and so much confidence, right? They got that warm-up game against Hawaii, a Hawaii team who's not good, but Hawaii did dominate their FCS opponent, on Saturday. They crushed, I think it was Portland State. So Hawaii's not, Connecticut, but they're not good, obviously. But UCLA dominated them. Then they went into the LSU game prepared, and they looked really good. I'll get to UCLA in a second. Keep it in the North. The reason the North is in shambles is not necessarily because of Oregon, although that wasn't a good look for them keeping that game close, right? But Oregon's going to have a chance this upcoming week. They're going to Ohio State. They win that game, no one cares about Fresno, and they're probably the favorite to win the Pac-12, and probably even one of the favorites to make the college football playoff if that happens. The reason the North is in shambles is because Cal lost to, I think it was Nevada. That's not good, right? You're a Power 5 conference team. You got to go beat Nevada, okay? Oregon State lost to Purdue. More respectable loss because it's a Big Ten team. Again, this is one of those mid-tier examples. Oregon State, kind of one of the bottom feeders of the Pac-12 North as of late. They're playing a lower level but still decent Big Ten school. That's the game that you got to go win to show that your conference has depth. Oregon State loses this game. Stanford, this is another example. They went and played a Big 12 team that's kind of top middle of the pack, right? In Kansas State. And they didn't look good at all. Kansas State looked way better than them. Stanford's offense was pretty abysmal. Defense looks okay, but it didn't look like they were even going to threaten to score any points in this game. So a bad non-conference loss for Stanford. The worst loss came for Washington, who lost to Montana, an FCS school. Now, granted, Montana's a decent football program. My sister actually went to University of Montana for about a year. And as far as atmosphere-wise, you go to Montana, it's like going to any big college football atmosphere. They love their football team out there, and they usually pack their stadium, and it's a lower level of football, but it's fun football, and there's pageantry there. But anyway, this was a terrible loss for Washington because it's a FCS upset, and Washington was one of the 5 ranked teams in the Pac-12, and probably the only team in the North that looked like they would be able to challenge Oregon. So that's a devastating loss for the Pac-12. Agreed, right, on that one. And then Washington State lost to, I think it was Utah State. So that's not good at all. Everybody in the Pac-12 North lost except for Oregon. And Oregon didn't play very well against their group of 5 opponent in Fresno State. So I get why some people are saying the Pac-12 is in shambles. But I also don't get it because look at the South. The South was awesome. The only team in the South that lost was Arizona. And they lost to BYU, who is an independent, I guess you could say they're kind of group of 5 level, but BYU was pretty good last year. And they lost that game 24-16. Okay, whatever. If that's the only loss of your division for the Pac-12 South, not bad. Utah won. They won pretty handily. They're ranked. Yeah, it wasn't a good opponent, but they won. USC won, and I think people are looking at this game like, oh, USC doesn't look that good. But San Jose State was a good team. San Jose State won their conference last year. San Jose State was not a good matchup for USC when you just looked across the board. So I don't give USC any negative credit for winning this game. They did end up even covering, right? A lot of people in the betting world were talking like, maybe this is a game you pick San Jose State to cover. USC was a 14-point favorite. And for much of the game, they were only up by about like 13 points. But they pulled away at the end, and they looked pretty good, right? Colorado got a win, They beat, who was it? Some FCS team, I don't know. But they won 35-7, so that's what you're supposed to do, right? You're a Power 5 football team. You go play an FCS team, you're supposed to win big. So that was good for them. Also, Colorado's playing Texas A&M next week. That's a cool matchup, just helmets-wise, uniforms-wise. You expect A&M to go in there and win handily, but as a college football fan, it's going to be cool to see those two teams on the field together. Kind of an old Big 12 game that we used to get more often, right? So that's going to be fun to see, just on another note. But also in the South, right, Arizona State, another one of the 5 ranked Pac-12 teams coming into week 1. They played, I don't know who the team was, I forget now, but it was an FCS game also, and they dominated 41-14, what you're supposed to do. And then you got UCLA, which wasn't one of the 5 ranked Pac-12 teams. I think they will be now. They beat LSU, and they looked good doing it. Now, here's the thing. LSU could be bad again because, honestly, I said earlier, I don't know why LSU came into this season a top 16 team when they were pretty bad last year. I think that was one of those situations where you just look at talent and you look at their roster and you're like, they have to be good, right? Well, no. Now, on paper, LSU did have a lot better roster than UCLA. Pretty significantly, actually. But UCLA, they looked like they were playing SEC football against LSU. Maybe not offensively, scheme-wise, but I'm talking about physical. The offensive line for UCLA opened up holes, and their running backs ran hard and broke tackles, right? The defense played really well. They got pressure on LSU's quarterback, who, by the way, is the son of former Florida State and Tampa Bay Buccaneers quarterback Brad Johnson. So that was kind of cool. I'm a Buck fan, so I know all about that 2002 Tampa Bay team. And Brad Johnson is he was a good quarterback, but he's probably one of the worst quarterbacks to win a Super Bowl. Tampa mostly leaned on their excellent defense that year. But anyway, Brad Johnson's awesome. He's a cool guy. And his son, Max Johnson, I believe, for LSU, he looks good, but he was getting pressured by this UCLA team. And the more important thing is, it looked like UCLA outcoached LSU. Because again, LSU has better athletes. The defensive players for LSU are big-time recruits. A lot of those players were wanted by Alabama, were wanted by Clemson, were wanted by Georgia. It's LSU. They got dudes. They always got dudes. Yet UCLA and Chip Kelly was able to look, like the Chip Kelly of old and scheme guys open. You combine that with the fact that he had linemen and running backs running really hard and playing really physical, and this game wasn't really even as close as the score was sometime. UCLA, outside of maybe the opening couple series, they were in control of the game. And LSU was playing on their heels most of the game. But it seems like nobody's going to really talk about this being a bad loss for the SEC. And I don't think they should, because I don't think it's a bad loss. I think the better team and better coached team won this game. But it is an impressive win for the Pac-12, right? In years past, you would have expected LSU to go dominate a game like this. And I think LSU still has a chance to be okay this year. I don't think it's that they're really bad. I think UCLA just took a huge leap forward. And that means the Pac-12 is taking a leap forward. Yeah, it was really bad that Washington lost, but can you imagine if Washington had done what they were supposed to do? You would have 6 ranked Pac-12 teams going into this week, because none of the other ranked Pac-12 teams lost besides Washington. And UCLA definitely should be ranked after what they just did to LSU. So you would have 6 ranked Pac-12 teams, and now Washington is going to play Michigan. Now, after what Washington just did, you're thinking they're probably not that good, but we have seen teams lose these FCS games and you're like, that's really weird, and then do bounce back. So don't completely count Washington out yet. But obviously, I'm expecting Michigan to win that game now based on what I saw. So I do not expect Washington to go on the road now and play even a good game against Michigan, but we'll just have to wait and see. I'm still excited to see that game. I'm going to watch it, obviously. And it's one of two monster games for the Pac-12 this upcoming week in week 2. Obviously, the main one, Ohio State going to Oregon, that's going to be a really big game. Really exciting. That's also going to be cool to see. We've seen this matchup in the Rose Bowl before, and the 2009 season ended with Ohio State and Oregon meeting in the Rose Bowl. That was also a great game. But it's cool to see these home non-conference games, right? Oregon going to the Horseshoe and playing there. I was so devastated that we didn't get Ohio State going to Eugene last year. As I've said before, I'm actually from Oregon, and although Florida State's my main team, and I went to Florida State for a few years, I ended up graduating from University of Oregon, and I grew up, being around Duck fans my whole life, and it's been really cool to see how the University of Oregon program has become a football power in the last, 10, 15 years. And I was very much looking forward to going to both of these Oregon games last year against Ohio State in Eugene, and then this year in Columbus. I won't be going to the Columbus game this year. After last year, my whole schedule kind of got changed, and I'm actually working next weekend in Oregon, surprisingly, so I won't be able to attend this game, but I'm very much looking forward to it. And then, you got the Washington-Michigan factor, so that's going to be a big game. Don't expect Washington to win, but exciting to see these two chances for the Pac-12 to really show what they're made of, right? If Oregon beats Ohio State, you will have a top-level Pac-12 team that looks like they're on par now with anyone else in the top 5, right? Because Ohio State looks really good. If Oregon wins this game, especially based on what they have coming after that with a weak North Division and the fact that they don't play USC and some of these scary teams in the South, they're going to look like the team to beat in the Pac-12. They also would give themselves that mulligan game where they could lose, they could get upset by somebody in the Pac-12, still go to their conference championship game with one loss. If they win, 90% chance, probably 95% chance, they would make the playoff in that instance. Now, I don't know if I'm expecting Oregon to win this game. I did not see enough from their quarterback play. But again, it was a weird matchup with Fresno State being a decent team that had already played. Oregon doesn't want to show that much on tape going into this Ohio State game. I think they were just trying to survive. Kayvon Thibodeaux, this is another scary thing. He got hurt in this game. He's probably the best defensive lineman in the country. And I don't know, I'm hoping he walked out the field under his own power and looked to be okay, but then he came out in a boot. I'm hoping that Oregon is just playing it safe and he's going to be good to go against Ohio State, because that would be a devastating blow if they lose him. But anyway, if Oregon can win that game, that would be huge for the Pac-12, considering what the middle tier and all these South teams are doing. Because then you're going to have a clear team that has a path to the playoff. You would have teams in the South that have a path to the playoff, considering they haven't lost yet, right? USC has athletes still. They have a chance to get through their division and get through their schedule with maybe only one loss possibly, right? The biggest game they play is Notre Dame. That's going to be challenging, but they have the athletes to play in that game. UCLA looks like a challenger now, but they have the athletes to play in that game too. And you can now say the same about UCLA. UCLA already has a big win over an SEC team, assuming that LSU doesn't completely fall apart, which could happen. But assuming that doesn't happen, this is a big win for UCLA. Either way, regardless of what happens with LSU, it's a giant confidence booster. And UCLA looks well coached, and they should play good the rest of the year. I'm really interested in the Pac-12 this year. It's something I haven't been able to say a lot of the more recent years. But from a who can make the playoff standpoint and from a depth standpoint and just who's going to win, the mystery of it all, I'm very excited and interested in Pac-12 football this year.